Yes, hello everybody. My name is Honora Pukago. I'm the spokesperson of Hannover Messe, and today I have the honor to be speaking with Adrien Bron, partner at Bain and Company. Adrien will be speaking at our center stage this year at Hannover Messe, and that's exactly the topic that we want to discuss today, the topics that he will be bringing on stage. But first of all, before I start, Adrien, a few words to yourself, please.
Yeah, hi. Nice to meet you. My name is Adrien Bron. I've been a partner at Bain for 20 years and seen how the machinery and automation landscape has evolved. And I'm excited because we are at the forefront, of course, of industrial and physical AI, and this is what we will talk about at the Hannover Messe.
Bain and Company will be introducing a study at Hannover Messe. The topic will be industrial automation from control to intelligence, and that will be the topic that you will be referring to on stage. What exactly do you mean by that? Control to intelligence. What's the idea behind that?
Yeah, it means, industrial automation has been about controlling production processes and equipment in those, right? But no longer, right? It's not longer about executing, instructions and predefined instructions. It's really about systems that learn, that adapt, and that ultimately make decisions in real time. So with that, the edge is moving to that, traditional control layer to the decision logic, and that requires better sensors, better data, and a much deeper understanding of production processes. And so, because also these processes are radically different for all industries and sectors, this shift will also drive a greater vertical specialization of industrial automation.
That's very interesting, because that's something I hear when I'm speaking with a lot of industry experts, verticalization. Just for our viewers, would you just, in a few words, explain what you mean by that?
Traditionally, automation is a pyramid, right? And the automation players have been focused on the specific layers of that pyramid, from sensors to PLCs, DCS, SCADA, and all the way into software and analytics. And what we mean with automation, with the verticalization of that automation pyramid, is that the competitive ecosystem and also the strategic differentiation will not be on these horizontal layers, but really by industrial sectors. And not only discrete and process and hybrid, but within those, food and beverage, pharmaceutical, cosmetics is completely different from each other. And the verticalization of the industrial automation landscape towards those end industries and sectors is what we will see more and more, and what will ultimately create a lot of value for the manufacturers.
So with other words, you're actually saying that the automation pyramid is coming to an end, and I think you're referring to it as an hourglass.
Yeah, look, an hourglass has, a thin middle. This is the PLC and DCS part of the pyramid that is getting, tighter and tighter strategically, but also in terms of value add and in terms of competitive differentiation. What will matter more is the top, right? The top of the hourglass, the data ops, the software, the analytic layer, but also the bottom of the hourglass, the edge, the sensors, the actuators, and all of the edge automation and intelligence that will be sitting, directly at the equipment, so that we have, fast enough automation loops and low latency.
And looking at the potential that AI has, so we have people saying that nearly by 2030, nearly half of the revenues will rely on AI in industrial applications. And what exactly is driving that from your point of view?
There are two forces. One of them is, of course, the new technologies and possibilities that AI bring. But more importantly, and as importantly, these are new requirements. Industrial automation was about controlling cost and quality in the production processes. Now we see more and more that manufacturers want to and have to control the entire value creation process, from product design to manufacturing, all the way to distribution, fulfillment, logistics, and after sales. And AI use cases will need to rely on data that cuts across, right? This is on the demand side. On the supply side, of course, we with additional data ops layer that are being put on top of traditional automation system, those also can cut across from design to industrialization, all the way to install base and services. So automation will when we talk about physical AI and about, industrial AI, we talk about data that combines the traditional distributed data models in the field that will be informed by, sensors in the production processes, and product data and supply chain data that will be combined and enable not only single use cases such as remote monitoring in the production, but really end-to-end control of the value chain. And that's what we mean with an AI-based industrial automation. This is one that begins with product design and one that ends with ultimately distribution of the product or of the goods in the supply chain.
I think that's a totally relevant point, especially also for the visitors of Hannover Messe. You just referred to use cases, and I think it's always an extreme challenge to find use cases that actually, by implementing AI, bring real value. And I think we're projecting like 70 billion in AI added value. What are maybe some of the use cases that you see that will bring that impact?
Yeah, but the use cases today are too narrow to bring value because the end, to end data layer or data fabric or data thread, right? Different words are being used, is not existent. So the cost of deployment are relatively high and the return are too narrow. But when more and more we will have interconnected data from design to distribution, we will see very high impact use cases in adaptive robotics, in predictive maintenance, in knowledge-based systems that contain product, batch, and usage data of produced product. And really, what is important for those use cases to finally bring value is that the data models must connect throughout the value chain. And this is what, once this is in place, today this is rarely in place, this will be the first wave of industrial AI.
So now let's take a step deeper maybe and talk more on the tech level. Are you actually saying that traditional control systems are becoming more and more commoditized?
Yeah, the hourglass, is this picture, right? So yes, it is. And the reason is because, PLCs and DCS have made industrial automation for the last, 30 years. But this is ultimately, a technology that is, similar to, if you compare this to cloud, that is similar to on-premise, computer at the end, right? And they will becoming commoditized because the control systems will play a lesser and lesser role in those use cases that we just were, talking about. They remain necessary, but the value will not come from ultimately deploying PLCs and DCS. Those are already in place in most of the production processes, but from adding software and analytics on top, and especially from increasing the physical to digital and digital to physical automation at the edge, in the bottom of the hourglass. So yes, we see also a lot of lower cost players that are putting margin on what has been ultimately the core profit pool of the industry. And we see a lot of disruptors that are coming on top and at the bottom with much newer and more valuable technology.
But that also means sensors and machines have to get smarter and smarter, right? So how are these smart devices changing in the future? What do you see there?
I like the idea of endpoints. And a sensor is an endpoint. It looks at something that happens in the physical world and transfers this to the digital world. And an actuator does exactly the other way around, right? It processes a digital signal and then it makes something happen. Today, those endpoints are passive. They are just transferring, information. When we talk about smart devices, we talk about those devices' ability to react immediately. So think about the sense, think, and act loop. More and more of this loop will happen at the endpoint in the sensor, in the motor, in the drive, and this is what we mean with smart devices, of course.
Okay, meaning that vertical depth in the near future, will be more important than this horizontal scale.
More than half of the growth in the industrial automation, market and profit pool will come from vertical specific offering, because they will need to, that technology will be differentiated at the end, at the bottom of the hourglass, at the top of the hourglass by vertical. And this is what will drive, value for the suppliers, but also value for the manufacturers. Customers want solutions that truly map to their production processes, to their compliance need, to their regulatory need, really to their operational reality, and the horizontal logic in the layers of the pyramid that has dominated the industry in the past will give place to much more vertical specificity and vertical depth here.
Which could be the very big competitive chance, especially for Germany and Europe, the domain expertise that you're lighting out with everything that AI can bring to that. And looking at that, what are early leaders doing differently, doing better than others, maybe from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, and in Europe we have many of those, and because we have been so embedded into the production processes, a lot of suppliers, being it of sensors, of HMI, SCADA, and MES systems, as well as PLCs and DCS, they have been very close to their production, to the customers' production processes. So what these, in order to remain relevant and differentiated, this is really about moving up the stack, right? So orchestrating data, software, and the smart devices at the bottom in vertical systems. And it's really also about evolving the business model, right? So, I mean, this is a project business for most of the suppliers, but the leaders are moving into, life cycle business, into, automation as a service, and they are, participating to risk and outcomes of their manufacturers. 30-50% productivity gain is very, very achievable, and being rewarded on that productivity gain for the supplier is, we believe, the business model of the future, instead of the traditional CapEx project business.
Adrien, last question from my side, which actually connects very good to that. Since you are speaking to CEOs, business leaders on a daily level, what is like the one strategic choice that a CEO can't delay right now?
It is the choice of which vertical to focus on. Almost all players are coming from that horizontal agnostic play where, with few exceptions, they have been supplying technology, and they face increasing, challenges in, fulfilling all the requirements in the different verticals. Think about Siemens, about ABB, about Honeywell for the big one, but also about, some of the more mid-market players. They need to decide on which vertical they want to focus. They need to adopt their go-to-market to being deeper in the production processes of this vertical. And they also need to discuss and decide where to partner to be a very relevant part of the vertical ecosystem. We have a different vertical system in oil and gas, in food and beverage, or in automotive. And leading across is no longer possible. So that vertical choice is the number one.
Adrien, thanks for sharing so much really, really interesting insights to what is going to happen in the future and what is also necessary, especially for the visitors of Hannover Messe, CEOs, business leaders of manufacturing companies, other industries, as you stated, to really keep that competitive edge. We're really looking forward to witnessing you on stage at Hannover Messe. Thanks for now, and see you in a few weeks, actually.
Thank you.